Okay, so I think that should be enough time for most people to have joined. So I will kick things off. First off, welcome everybody to our latest Signifyd Flow event. I am Ed Whitehead. I'm the Managing Director for Signifyd here in EMEA, and I'll be your host and moderator for our session today. So for those of you who haven't attended one of our events before, Signifyd Flow is our series we run around the globe, bringing together e-commerce leaders, retailers, our customers and our partners together to network, discuss best practices, ideas and trends they're seeing in their respective roles and industries. Now, typically we run these as in-person events, but in light of the current social restrictions due to the COVID outbreak, we have pivoted to bring you this program virtually. So before we get started, there will be a quick bit of housekeeping. We will be recording this session and we will be distributing both the recording and the slides afterwards. Please do send your questions in as we go through, but we will save those until the end of the session and go through them then. We also have a e-commerce leaders Slack channel for those of you who are familiar and using Slack. So this allows you actually to engage in discussion directly with each other and not just with the Signifyd panel here via the sort of typical Q&A process. So yes, please look out for the link for that in the chat channel. Join it, sign up, very easy to follow it through, and then you're free to network amongst your peers who are also on the call with you as well. So that channel will stay open after the event as well. So please feel free to engage there, maintain your connections afterwards and continue to network within the group. And as I say, I think that should be in the Slack channel, in the chat channel now. So moving on to our speakers for the day, I'm delighted to introduce the team here. So first off, we have Kumar Senthil, Head of Product E-Commerce at Samsung. So Senthil brings decades of experience to the discussion, having worked for many leading tech firms, including both Microsoft and Groupon before Samsung. We also have Mike Liberty, that's Signifyd's own co-founder and Chief Product Officer. Mike is somewhat of a risk expert, having led the fraud and risk management initiatives for digital goods at PayPal prior to setting up Signifyd. And we have Skye Spear. Skye is our VP Global Partnerships, who will be supporting me with the Q&A and the Slack channels. Skye is another veteran of the industry, long tenure at RSA prior to his 5 years at Signifyd. And Skye was also working out of the UK office very recently until the COVID outbreak forced him back to the US. So Skye is very well versed with the challenges nuanced to European merchants as well. Okay, let's have a look at the agenda. So we'll be starting off with a short update on the industry trends we see in our e-commerce pulse data. Signifyd has been releasing this data, charting the impact of COVID on e-commerce sales since the start of March. So I will start off by giving you a short update of those stats at the head of this. Then we'll move on to our fireside chat between Senthil and Mike, and that's discussing the trends they're seeing due to the impact of COVID, as well as the tools and practices put in place to ensure a successful fulfillment process has been maintained at Samsung. So this is the same discussion we ran with Senthil last week in the US, and we were running it again live today, but due to some last minute unforeseen circumstances, that is now no longer possible. But to allow the show to go on, we are going to play the recording. And look, I can assure you it's a great discussion. We have some excellent questions in there from the audience last week, which we will also include and run through. And that's dealing with, say, the impact of warehousing and customer service, the winners and losers from the current COVID climate, and actually Senthil's viewpoints on how consumer behaviour is going to change over the long term. And then we'll sort of wrap up with the Q&A and the networking Slack channel, answering the questions you have, whether that's through the pulse data or indeed around the topics raised on the fireside chat before we wrap up for the close. Okay, so moving on to the first section, and that's the data, trends and pulse update. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Signifyd, we are a global provider of e-commerce fraud prevention. and we work with some 10k merchants globally, and that's processing over 100 billion of transaction data, $100 billion of transaction data. So that clearly gives us deep insights into global retail trends, and we're able to use that to analyze the impact of COVID over the last few months. The traffic split we see is roughly 42% US, about 37% EMEA, and 21% APAC ex-China. So it's good representation of global traffic, and that is the universe I've based this analysis on. But needless to say, if you want to do a deep dive into specific countries or specific categories, then do get in contact with your Signifyd rep, and we can facilitate that as well. Okay, so with any sort of stats analysis, we do need a baseline to work with. And so what I've pulled here from Statista is the expected or projected growth for the e-commerce market, encompassing the sale of physical goods to private end users. So this is the physical goods to consumer market. Now, we have excluded travel, digital ticketing and marketplaces, as we feel that really best represents the customer base, you, the merchants that we're working with. Okay, so really there's just one main stat here that I'm drawing your attention to, and this is where we're going to baseline against the growth of e-commerce 2019 to 2020. The forecast was a projected 15% growth. So what's more the reality actually, and this is more what we have seen. So the trend is for far greater growth across our merchants. We've indexed this back to the last week of Feb, when we sort of really saw the first sustained news about the outbreak starting to appear in the media. We see initial dip at the start of March, probably due to kind of blanket economic concerns, and then really sustained growth building as people go into more voluntary and self-imposed lockdown, and that's sort of more towards the mid-end of March. And then actually as the government comes through and imposes these actual mandates around work from home, stay from home, or stay at home, we really do see that trend explode upwards. So peaking around about a 56% increase. So maintaining, good growth all the way from the middle of April right through to the latest stats we have up to the 5th of May. And it's significant, and we're seeing it maintained as well. And I think that's the big question for people, is just how sustainable is that growth? And we'll look at some of the underlying metrics in that as we try to predict whether it is going to stay at that elevated level. But let's go back to the projections first and try and sort of understand what that means. So I mentioned before, the expectation was for some 15% year-on-year growth. If we then look into our same storefront growth for year-on-year for March, we've actually seen a 34.4% growth in that same storefront. And what that really equates to is this 18-month acceleration on the compound annual growth model. So the CAGR for the next 18 months, we've almost jumped ahead to where we would expect to be in terms of e-commerce growth if nothing around COVID had happened. And then if we look even sort of further down the line, and we're looking at April, where we saw that sort of more significant amounts of growth. So trending some 50% up on the same storefront sales, and that's really pushing us, 36 months down the line as well. So really what we're saying, if we see that sustained volume at that level, effectively e-commerce has jumped forward 2 years in its expected life cycle expansion, and that really is due to the COVID outbreak. So it's obviously quite a phenomenal impact that we've seen there. Of course, not all industries are equal, and sorry to bring people back down to earth a little bit, but that same level of growth has not been felt across all categories. Here we have a snapshot at the sort of super category level. So this is the parent category, if you will. If we look across those, keeping healthy, keeping high seems to be the most significant concern for people. And then as we move across, we can see that the beauty, cosmetics and luxury spaces not really seeing such a great run. It must be said though, even those industries have pulled back in recent weeks. Perhaps it's the hope of the easing of restrictions or just the desire by people to boost their spirits by treating themselves, but actually, kind of across the board, we are seeing positive growth, naturally some bigger winners than others. A quick call out with the business supplies, obviously that's the one that's negative here. The way that we categorize and what we mean by business supplies is reflective of B2B. So it's not the home office type business supplies. So really no surprise it's been impacted the most. So I mentioned again, we're very happy to run through any of these categories with you, do deep dives into that, try and understand specifics that you want to analyze, and indeed break out into the subcategories. Certain merchants will categorize very easily: Samsung for electronics, Goodyear for auto parts, Lacoste, for fashion. Those fit nicely in their little buckets. But then there are notable exceptions of merchants who straddle categories. So we work with Walmart, and we have to allocate those type of merchants on a best fit basis as sort of dictated by their main SKUs. But we can get down to that kind of product level or that sort of grouping of product type if that's a level of detail of analysis that's going to be helpful to you. So yeah, as mentioned, please do let us know if that's an exercise you're interested in pursuing. Okay, so I mentioned we try and understand a little bit around whether this is going to relate to continued growth, actually, and sustainable growth. What we have here is the red line showing new users. So that's the first time we've seen them in our network. And then the yellow line showing the number of those users coming back within 30 days. So that's the people buying again within a 30-day sort of refresh period and starting to convert into return purchases. So that over time is typically pretty consistent at 50%. Perhaps the exception you can see here quite glaringly is the Christmas sales period. We do tend to see a spike in new online customers. That's driven by online sales, perhaps even a bit of avoidance of the high street, but they don't all necessarily convert to repeat users. And that's where we see the greatest sort of divergence. In that situation until now, you've been able to go back to the physical stores after the event. There hasn't been that restriction. What's different now, of course, government enforced lockdown, physical stores staying shut. It's just simply not an option. So the consumers, by their nature, are forced to become repeat online customers. And we're seeing those lines converge actually as we go through April into May. So this is really changing consumer behavior. That's our strong belief. The people who were afraid to buy online before, thought their card details would be stolen or goods were never going to be turning up, they're really being forced to experiment with the channel now and finding, actually it does work. There is convenience there, it is safe, and actually they're starting to buy more and come back. I do expect we'll see a brief resurgence on the high street as lockdowns are eased, just consumers wanting to get outdoors again, but then see a return to the convenience and speed of what is now becoming a tried and trusted channel in e-commerce that a lot of these users haven't had to adopt before. Okay, so lastly, I'm just going to look at a couple of categories or sort of subcategories here that hopefully are relevant to the folks I know who've signed up and are on the phone, and then also to the wider sort of theme of fulfillment challenges that Santil and Mike are going to talk about. So here we're looking at consumer electronics first. As I say, this and the next couple of slides are run at the subcategory level, not an individual merchant, but subcategory. So here, for example, you've got all of the merchants we work with in consumer electronics, not the wider electronics, but down to consumer electronics, of course, which Samsung is a part of. Kind of as we've seen with a lot of our consumer goods merchants, there's this initial decline early March, as no one's quite sure what is going on, but then as the sort of self-adopted work from home policies come into play end of March, and then the actual backup of that turning into a government mandate, we just saw this massive increase in spending as consumers kit their homes out with work monitors, wireless extenders, new TVs for the endless hours of Netflix consumption, and the likes. So it will be interesting, I think, for this category to see how that persists as we start to go away from the lockdown. A lot of these goods do tend to be one-offs, or certainly have a life cycle of 2-3 years minimum, and they're not necessarily trending towards repeat purchase. So yeah, we're interesting to monitor, and certainly something we'll be keeping an eye on. But whichever way you look at it, for now, the growth has been very significant. And then I want to talk about the sort of two-sided story of fulfillment. First off, so here we're looking at online grocery, and anyone who's seen sort of these stats or follows the online grocery market will know that this isn't normal. Okay, this is one of the most reluctant industries to move online. People like going to the shops, and they like choosing their items for themselves. However, it does sort of seem, the fear of COVID contagion has finally outpaced the fear of getting something delivered on the same day as its best before dates. In fact, I think we'd have seen more growth in this sector had the capacity for fulfillment been there. There's no doubt, there's been some great innovations in the space. We're seeing a lot more door drop deliveries. Companies like Tesco announcing they've gone over 1 million online order capacity a week. And also a lot of restaurant suppliers or boutique suppliers, typically supplying to the restaurant trade, are now delivering to the public as well, contactless, dropped on your doorstep. But whichever sort of innovation it is, even with the giants like Tesco, there is a physical limit to the capacity that has been capping that growth. And, that's evidenced clearly by the long queues we still see outside the supermarkets. And I'm sure, no doubt, many of us here have had chats with friends over Zoom where inevitably someone starts bemoaning the fact they can't get an online order slot. So whilst a massive shift, consumer behavioral shift to grocery or online grocery ordering, actually, if the capacity had been there, these people could have, the grocery sector probably could have benefited a lot more. I guess then we look to the reverse, and that really is digital gaming. Okay, so there are no such logistical challenges associated with the delivery of this product. We're looking at digital downloads, we're looking at in-app purchases. I think what's quite interesting about this time period, or where we're seeing the spike here, is actually it's a much later surge in sales with this category. Is that reflective of the latter increased desire for distraction? The distraction buying piece. You've gone through the TV shows that you've watched, every bit of DIY possible has been completed, and now it's that, well, what do I turn to keeping myself occupied? What's quite interesting is the size of growth here, and that can only mean new gamers coming on board. That can't just be a spike in consumables of the existing gamer base. That has to be new gamers coming on board. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out after the social distancing and stay-at-home restrictions are lifted. Are people going to put down the games console and get back outdoors? Or we all know how addictive gaming can be. Is that a monumental shift in popularity or further popularity of the gaming industry? But certainly with those with groceries and digital gaming, you've got the opposite ends of the scale, sort of fulfillment capacity wise, where grocery probably had a much larger growth if the capacity had been there, and then gaming, that's totally unfettered by delivery capacity issues, has seen really just tremendous growth. Okay, so hopefully those insights were interesting, gave you bit of a view into the trends we're seeing, set up a bit of the conversation we're about to have now with Sentinel and Mike. So it's not all doom and gloom out there either. I think, as you can see, trending across the board, we're generally up quite considerably, certain categories doing very well. And yeah, it's certainly something we will continue to monitor. we're actively engaged with a lot of our clients, providing this analysis, providing them benchmarking. So please do either drop some questions in for the Q&A later in this session, or do feel free to get in touch with any of us, and we can help you deep dive into the kind of metrics you want to see for your own business. Okay, so again, it is regrettable that we don't have Senthil and Mike here. I think I've seen quite a few people join since we kicked off. We were due to run this event live today. It was a rerun of the event run in the US just a few days ago. Unfortunately, for unforeseen circumstances, we aren't able to do that, but we are going to rerun the playback of it. And there were some great questions in there anyway from the audience last week, which we'll play through. Okay, so all being well technically, this should work smoothly.
So hi everyone, I'm Mike Liberty, the co-founder and chief product officer of Signifyd. I was a little worried that after a couple of weeks here that I would have to put on a collared shirt, but then one of our customers kind of gave me a good excuse to still wear a hoodie. This is Pure Fix Cycles, actually Pure Cycles now. They were actually our first customer for guarantees 7 years ago, and they sold just yesterday to JBI. So if you're in the market for a bike, you get a little exercise. Take a look at these guys. It's awesome to see our customers grow up like that. Yeah, I was thrilled to see it. So so after boring you guys with a little bit of description there with my attire, Senthil, really great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. It seems appropriate to kick things off. I'm a big fan of superhero movies, and the most interesting part of those tends to be the origin stories. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your origin story. As Kalina mentioned, you joined Microsoft 15 years ago, and then Groupon, two great companies. Would love to hear about that, and then of course we'll get into you at Samsung now. But why don't we start with the origin story?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me for this. I think it's a fun story. It's going to be. So I was a software developer. Basically, I started my career as a software developer. And I think in 2000, I came to US. And as every immigrant, every H-1B guy goes through, you have to pay the green card tax, right? So, and every time you change the company, it sort of resets itself. And I sort of changed to 3 companies before joining Microsoft. And I was like 2 months away from getting to a point where I cannot renew my H-1B. So I need to get my green card somehow filed. And I thought about it, okay, man, it's end of story, forget it. Let me move back either to India and I also had a permanent residency in Australia. So maybe I'll just move there. And so then at that time, I almost packed my bags basically. And then at that time, this Microsoft opportunity came up. And the hiring manager sort of gave me 2 options. Hey, do you want to go as a dev lead or you want to go as a product manager? And that's the time I was losing taste for writing code because the product managers I was interacting, I was getting frustrated. Man, I could come up with better requirements than these guys. Well, why am I not doing that job? So then that's when I said, okay, maybe I'll try the product manager role. And then, God, I really loved it. I just been enjoying it since then. And it's a fun job because, you use all your creativity to create new stuff. And at Microsoft, I had the opportunity to work in Windows Azure. That was a EDC launch in 2008. That was really fun. And then after that, I moved on to Office. We launched Office 365. So great experience in 8 years at Microsoft. But then I started feeling like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And even though, Microsoft is an amazing company, I enjoy it, and I have great relationship with people. But I started feeling like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And I said, okay, maybe I should try something else. That's when Groupon opportunity came up. Groupon was actually setting up their office in Seattle, and I was one of the earliest employees there. And it is a funny story. In 2013, Groupon actually, as you guys know, grew through acquisition, right? So then they didn't really have as robust goods infrastructure. It was built on coupon infrastructure, but it's totally two different ballgame. And I was pulled into a meeting in early 2014 where they were analyzing how many orders that were actually backlogged that we got it in for holiday, for Christmas. There was close to 1 million plus orders that haven't been shipped in January, February timeframe. So customers are upset, and the leaders are all panicking to figure out what to do. And that's when, I was pulled into this. And then I pitched this idea saying, okay, let's invest in building a robust, while we clean this up, let's build a robust, platform so that next year we don't run into the same issue. And now I'm talking in March, April timeframe. I'm racing against time because I can't launch it in Q4. I need to finish it in Q3. So I scrambled to put together a team and built a e-commerce platform from ground up, tying up all these different systems together. Man, that was almost like, I got killed myself. It was 16, 17 hour day every day. I finally launched it. Lo and behold, everything fell apart. So there was a lot of lessons we learned in that. But fortunately, we spent another 30 days to prime it up for the holidays in 2014. And everything sailed smooth from there on. But tons of lessons, what not to do, primarily.
Yeah.
Then
I'm sure you're the only one who's had that experience of prepping for Q4 and then everything comes crashing down during the holidays.
But the thing is, I'm so happy about this. We didn't have any order that slipped through the crack for 2024. So that was one of the greatest moments.
Yeah. So I'm sure, you took some lessons learned away there and career advice, from that, 15 years at both Microsoft and Groupon. Any, tidbits you kind of want to share with the group here?
Sure. I mean, one thing I would say is, we should choose the career what we like to do, right? Because at the end of the day, we spend 8 to 12, 15 hours a day at work, depending on it. Unless you like to do it, it's going to be hell. And you're not going to be successful as well, right? I was starting to feel that when I was a developer, towards the end of my coding life, I was starting to feel like that I wasn't enjoying it. And I was looking for something else. And that's when, because naturally I was more of a creative guy, I would say. I like to do things, like to create things. So when I changed my career, I really enjoyed it. I never felt like working 12 hours was a burden, right? But earlier I used to start feeling that way. So that's why I would say people, you may not be doing what you like to do now, but always keep a eye for it and see when opportunity comes, jump on it, right? Because practically we all have to take care of family, we all have responsibilities. You can't just drop the job and go and look for something you really like to do, and it may not happen immediately. So always look out for it, and when it comes, take it. And that means that you may have to take some calculated risk, right? And you may take a cut in your salary, Lord knows, right? So, but at the same time, if you like to do something and you are in it, you're going to be successful. So that's the most important thing. You need to give the weightage for it, and then go for it, right?
I think that advice is so perfect, and certainly echoes my own experience. Those 12-hour days or more become only are tolerable if you really love what you're doing. So could you talk about Samsung a little bit? Like, what's the dynamic, there in product management, and specifically product management in e-commerce? How does it differ from, other places you've been? Yeah.
I mean, so product managers basically play the pivotal role in bringing things together, right? New ideas, looking out for new concepts, things like that. A developer or a QA engineer or somebody like that, they're not going to be looking out, okay, what am I going to do next, or what are we going to build next? A product manager sort of is leading the paving the way for the company or product, right? So they have to look for new opportunities and be proactive. I mean, unless product managers are proactive, they're not going to be successful, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. Any role is the same, but it is all the more important for a product manager to be proactive. And at Samsung, people have to look out for new opportunities, especially new capabilities. What do we need to bring it for we build it as a product so that it enables the sales in new ways. So, and including fulfillment partners, are they operating at an optimal level? What are the issues we have, right? So constantly look out for those things and keep optimizing it. And identify the opportunities, where can we optimize it? And obviously customer experience also plays a key role. Where are the drop-offs happening, right? And how do we make it better? Where is there a conversion issue we're having? And so on, right? So the product managers play a critical role in monitoring that and making product adjustments as we keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I think right now, these fulfillment folks who are working in logistics are kind of the unsung heroes, right, of the crisis right now. I mean, you must be working really closely with them.
One of the things I also tell my product managers is to just, don't worry about making mistakes. Okay to make mistakes, right? Because unless you make mistakes, you're not going to learn it. Obviously, you can watch from others' mistakes to learn, but sometimes, because every day you have to make decisions, and you have to be empowered to make mistakes and make the decision, right? Otherwise, you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow. And at the end of the day, I want each and every product manager in my team to be a better leader than me, right? That is success. Right? That's how I sort of coach them or whatever it is, right? I mentor them.
Yeah, I give the same advice to our product managers as well. It's make mistakes, as long as you recover quickly, right? It's better to move fast and recover quickly. Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, talk about the early days, at Samsung. I mean, kind of what were the opportunities that you first saw when you came in? What was some of the low-hanging fruit? How did you go about identifying it? I know there's a lot packed into that question, but it'd be great to hear.
I mean, when we, so Samsung actually got a bit serious, I think towards the end of 2015, 2016, to sort of boot up the online business. They had online business before that, but that was more of a Me Too sort of a sideshow. Right. So a bunch of us, they put together a team in early 2016, and a bunch of us came together. But at that time, the key challenge was channel conflict. So every business leader would say, oh, now all our channel partners are going to be upset. Now you guys are going to start selling direct. You're going to cannibalize our business. That's one of the primary concern we had. From internal business perspective. And then we were sort of selling phones, not really. And then we were sort of on and off on different things. And we really didn't have an e-commerce infrastructure. We were all outsourced and completely managed by third parties. So we joined, and then I was just pulled into a meeting on day one. And they were sort of discussing how we're going to launch this new program called Samsung Upgrade Program, where you can upgrade your phone every 24 months or whatnot. And this is going to be built by between a collaboration of 4 partners. They're going to build it. That's what their plan was. And we said, okay, great. Now, have you guys sort of built any experience? Can you guys show that? And then they just walked us through this. Like, you know, it was just hopping between site A to site B to site C, like 3-4 hops. Finally, you can end up buying a phone. I was like, okay, do you guys really feel that this is going to work? And I was like, yeah, why not? I said, okay, great. I said, no, this is not going to work. Let's just, you know, scratch all this and start from ground up. And let's just streamline this experience at least. If not, the underlying infrastructure, okay, we cannot do it. Let's just at least build it in the front end. Because I know from Groupon experience, I don't want it to take up too much than what I can chew. So we sort of try to build just the user experience. And so the thing was, okay, we built all this and put a lot of hard work. We brought all these partners together, and then the user experience, to whatever extent possible, we streamlined it, and we launched it. And take a guess how many orders we got.
I'm not going to venture a guess.
0. Oh my God, that was really very hard pill to swallow at that point.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, God, man, this is too much to take it.
Yeah.
And then we were back to the drawing board.
Yeah, tough to keep the team motivated in that situation too, right? Yeah.
Really hard. And then it's like, man, this is too hard. And then we sort of figured out, okay, Samsung is in the business of selling phones and not in activation. Okay, that's a side show, not a main show, right? But this flow, what we built, did both together. And unless you do both, you cannot complete the purchase. And we could see a trend that leads to 0 from 100% before even get to the final step. So then I said, okay, forget it, because there were some unit economics were into play for bundling the activation into that mix. So that's why that whole program was built that way. Then I said, okay, I challenged, then we went through, looked at all the unit economics, and said, okay, does it really have to be, or is there other ways to figure this out? And then we challenged the business, and finally said, okay, whatever it is, I'm not going to go into the numbers and specifics, but whatever it is, whether we make profit or loss, we need to break this paradigm first. So the timing was so perfect that S8 launch came along the way, and we decoupled the financing versus the activation, and then S8 was a blockbuster launch for us. We sold more phones than any other channel at that point, right? So from that point on, we learned a lot of things, what to do, what not to do, especially in the selling the phones. There are so many different things involved in it. It is not just, like every other electronic product. Phone is a different beast altogether.
Yeah.
And really that sort of bootstrapped basically our business. And from that point on, we sort of, we built our own e-commerce platform and again in 2017, and then we scaled the business from there on.
I think that's such a critical point to understand the entire customer journey, right? And this might be idiosyncratic to Samsung, but every business kind of, has that where you've got to understand all the drop-off points in the flow. Certainly the one we're most familiar with is when the user drops off to being declined on their payment, right, or a fraud check. But there's so many other points where they could fall off. So I mean, you go from 0 orders, right, with that first launch. Flash forward to today, we're kind of in unprecedented times, and I could ask you how COVID is kind of affecting your day to day. It might be quicker to ask how it's not. But love to hear about that some more and how you guys are coping.
So it's pretty much across the world. You know, everybody's working, especially from home. It's long hours, right? And what I realize is none of us know how to work from home. That's the sad truth, right? So because the day starts at 7 o'clock for me, and then it ends at 10:30 in the night. It's super hard.
Well, when you work from home, you never leave work, right?
And I was like, how can I reduce my meetings? And there's no break between meetings, and it is super hard. And people feel, let down when I don't join the meetings, or they're stuck with some things. And especially when you're dealing with global teams, we have to work with their time zones as well, meeting with people in Europe or in APAC. We have to meet in their time zone as well to sort of for meetings. So it has been quite a challenging situation. And I'm trying to sort of minimize those meetings and get through the day. And you being in the meeting all day, you miss out on emails, and there are so many emails pile up, and it's like a homework in the evening, right? So you clear all the emails out. And it's quite a challenging and difficult. I'm sure it's I see that everywhere people complaining about the same pattern. But at this time also there's an opportunity, especially in the e-commerce space. There is growth, has been actually walked through the numbers. There is growth in e-commerce sector.
Yeah.
It comes with challenges as well, right? So that's the thing. Now, to make this work, what I see at least, if your product is in a high ASP, what I mean is your product is expensive products, right? Or like our phones and TVs. The key here is to make it affordable, right? That is very important. Come up with a mechanism where you can make it affordable, and people are getting to a point where they're capital hours. They would like to pay over time, or ideally through subscriptions with no fringes attached. Right, so that's the kind of model that's evolving now, where people prefer such things. I mean, the studies over and over shows that millennials, for sure, they are turning in that direction. Right, they like expensive products, but they don't want to pay upfront. Whether they can afford or not is a different issue, but even if they can, they don't want to. Right, they like the experience, but they don't want to invest in things like the expensive products like this. So that's where we need to look for ways to make it affordable, come up with opportunity ways, subscription models or financing models, where or leasing, to make it affordable to capture that market. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the multi-billion-dollar question, right, on everyone's mind right now is which of these trends, have staying power, how much is going to be transient. And I know, everyone's kind of fortune telling in this environment, but I'm going to ask you to, put on your fortune teller hat for a second and give folks your opinion on what's persistent and what's transient.
Yeah, so what I think is, a lot of people who have never shopped online before have got to know how to shop online now. I mean, by force them to sort of do online shopping. But however, I also think, local businesses have to stay for the local jobs to be there, right? So people are going to be conscious about that. Right, to support local business. That means that it's going to be a blend of, online growth, but there's going to be a reasonable level of offline business as well, retail business as well, will be continuing to be there. I don't think overnight, okay, so from summer this year, all retail is dead, only e-commerce, right? It's not going to be that way. People also want to go out. They want to go to the mall. They want to do shopping. It's not like, all the time they're going to be online. But they got comfortable. So some things they may say, okay, maybe I don't want to go to the store. I just buy it online. But I do think people will go to retail, and retail will be there for reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, as Bennett was talking about earlier, you've got so many new users who have now cleared that big drop-off hurdle of creating an account, and so now it reduces all the friction, that's necessary to make that first order. And so I think there'll be a lot of follow-up on that, even when we do come out of this. So, post-COVID, right? When we do come out, what are the big customer experience things that you guys are focused on, towards the end of this year or even into 2021? And it could be Samsung specific or tied into kind of general trends, but again, kind of fortune telling a little bit. What do you think, those trends are going to be?
Sure. So post-COVID, I've seen few studies done before COVID, and also for this post-COVID, I think it is going to validate that situation where customers are going to give business to the companies that have been socially responsible or conscious, right? That is how I believe it, or at least I feel that way, because people are going to get, people are already upset about the companies that don't do much or don't do enough to support people in general. For instance, good example I would give is what Elon Musk did. Right, as a great gesture, as soon as there's no ventilators in New York, he said, okay, I'm going to fund 400,000 ventilators. That's a great gesture, which means people are going to think about that when they make a purchase in the future, right? So things like that, whichever companies sort of take effort, put effort to look out for people, they're going to be winning in the future, in my opinion. That's how I see it. And the companies that really, even treat their employees badly, just, blatantly laying off over a Zoom call. I read one company just laid off people. Those type of companies, I think, will have issues when people are going to remember that. So it's very important to treat the employees well and also take care of the customers and also and be socially responsible. Do what you can. Nobody's asking to, spend billions and billions, but at least be responsible. Do something meaningful for society when the society is in need, right?
Yep.
That's what I would say as a key. Winners and losers will be decided by that. Yeah,
I think that's a great point and a good one to end on before we kind of open it up for questions from the floor. So I think, Kalina, you might have some questions kind of get it kicked off, but we've also fielded some from the crowd. So I'll hand it off to Kalina Senthil. This was just great. Thank you. But I'm sure there's going to be even more questions for you here.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, guys. Let me just share the therapy session. Thanks so much for this. This was awesome. Looks like we actually do have quite a few questions coming in. Let me just prepare the section over here. As you guys know, I know some of you guys are posting questions inside the Slack channel and also inside the actual Zoom. Feel free to keep them coming in the Zoom, and I'll try to manage them. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. But keep in mind, we will be able to continue the conversation inside that Commerce Slack channel. So the first one up, it looks like it's from Luke. I'm not sure, I think it might be directed to both of you all, but what components of the e-com tech stack are most vital for retailers to invest in now to weather coronavirus / be more prepared for unexpected industry shifts in the future? Not sure, I think both of you guys might have a answer for this, but maybe Simple, if you want to kick off your thought process, and then we'll move it over to you, Liberty.
Sure. So two things. In my opinion, actually, two things. Number one is logistics. There's a lot of innovation that's going to happen in logistics. And because, customers now are, the expectation from the customers are just, they want instant gratification. So it is coming from every day. It came from 3-day, 4-day shipping to next day. People wanted it the same day, ideally, next few hours, whatnot, right? So it's going to be, a lot of innovation is going to happen in that space where people wanted to get the product as soon as possible. And because of that, I think there's going to be a trend where this online and offline retail is going to blend, where order online, pick up in store is going to become more and more prevalent, in my opinion. Or the next few, what is that called? Even in the same day delivery, they say this anyway. This pickup can be picked, somebody can pick it up from a local store and deliver it to you in the next few hours, right? So those type of innovations are going to come along the way. And then the second piece is the customer experience itself, right? So there's still a lot of websites ask customer to sign up, and that is friction in checkout is going to be a killer for business. That's one of the areas where innovations were going to happen, where faster checkouts and things like that are going to come, and also faster delivery. Everything fast. So that's where the innovations are going to be, in my opinion. Mike, you may have any points as well.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think especially right now, what we're seeing in our data is that fulfillment times are kind of creeping up, right? As everyone's buckling under this increased load. With that said, part of the reason I think that's happening is people, Amazon has had their struggles, right? So people are kind of turning away and kind of looking to other retailers to fill that gap where they might have turned to Amazon. And so I think there's a huge opportunity here right now for other retailers to capture new users, right? If they deliver on that promise of really, really fast delivery. And so that integration, right, between the moment you've finished the order to fulfillment, logistics, and that, I think is where the investment should go right now and will go.
Yep.
Great. Looks like we have another one. Could you describe the solution landscape you're using for fraud management? And then there's another piece added onto it. Do you use any other solution aside from Signifyd for fraud management at Samsung?
Okay, so Samsung we use for payment fraud, we use only Signifyd. But there's different fraud, like promo abuse fraud type scenarios that come in, where resellers try to take advantage of the promotions we run, which we want to pass it on to the end consumers, but resellers get on board and try to abuse that promotions. For those, we have our own internal tools to sort of handle those things. But for payment, definitely we just use only Signifyd.
Got it. Another question coming in. So this one's directed for you, Simple. What are you excited about, or what is Simple excited to be working on for Samsung regarding omnichannel? And then many retailers are leveraging their prior omnichannel initiatives from years past and seeing great success. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep, so omnichannel is one of our core strategy going forward. And we want to enable, see, we get millions of visitors to Samsung.com. And we want to use those visitors, not just, take the orders ourselves and fulfill it, but we also want to enable our channel partners to sort of fulfill them as well, if possible. That is where I'm saying that there's going to be a blend between online, offline, where if the customer wants it and next few hours, and now that they are there, they're ready to place the order, want to pick up the local retailer who can, where they can go pick it up, or somebody can deliver it from there to the customer, right? So we want to enable all those scenarios. That's where we're heading.
Perfect. And it looks like this one might go to both of you guys. What advice would you give to other product departments who are scaling their fulfillment process?
Fulfillment process. Okay, so I would say, you know, especially in this COVID-19 situation, plus going forward, definitely you need to have more than one warehouse. And I'll tell you why. Because if you test positive on one warehouse, you're out of that node completely for a few days, or at least a day or two. So you don't want to slow down your delivery. So obviously you need to have a backup plan to have another warehouse where you can fulfill it from. So as soon as we sort of, started seeing the trend in China and Korea early on, we started working a little bit proactively to sort of expand our fulfillment capabilities to sort of distribute it. We already had a distributed node, but we sort of made it a little bit more robust so that there's not much of impact to the fulfillment. And we did have a bit of challenge where people were test positive. So if anybody tests positive, that whole shift work goes offline for 10 days, right? So they are self-quarantined, and then we operate on 3 shifts now, that we spread people apart, and we reduce the shift per shift so that we have less number with social distancing within, safety within us, and we take all sort of precautions. So that since then, we sort of haven't seen any spread of that in viruses. So we're thankful for our partners sort of operating in that way.
I would echo that, and also add, think about the pieces after the user completes their order that can be automated, right? And automate all of that as much as possible. Right now, you don't want your customer service people to be, doing the pieces that can be automated, because the piece that can't, right, is actually talking to customers and solving their problems. So really, every part of the checkout flow that can be automated, and the post flow, do it soon.
That's a good one. Another one for you, Simple, is they say you make a good point that consumers will return to physical stores, but how will the early post-COVID experience affect that? And they say, I mean, if people have to wait in line to get into stores, practice social distancing inside, et cetera, won't that set back the embrace of brick and mortar?
There will be challenges. Obviously, I'm saying there won't be, but people are going to be wearing masks, people are going to be wearing gloves when they venture out, and there will be challenges, especially for small retail stores. Stores like Costco, obviously, they have now capabilities to handle that. But smaller stores, apparel stores, or smaller stores will have challenges, and they will have to adjust to this new normal, right? But as we get this vaccine or cure for coronavirus, it will make it a bit more seamless transition. But until then, I think it is going to be a difficult time for all the retailers, especially the stores. But post that, I think we'll be back to normal to some extent.
We definitely see some of our merchants kind of innovating in this area to kind of lessen the amount of contact that you need to have. So they'll do curbside pickup, right, or scheduled times that that you could come and pick it up. So it's I think, as you said before, Senthil, it's going to be a time of major innovation in this area Yeah.
Definitely. It looks like we're winding down. I think we have time for one more. And this one it's a simple one, I think. Are you reviewing weekly pulse updates at Samsung and sharing that, with the entire Samsung department?
I mean, we do provide updates. Our leaders actually are super interested in how our e-commerce channel is doing. We do provide updates, and then there's a communication that happens within Samsung as well to proactively. Human resource department keeps everyone up to date and in terms of what are the next steps, what do they need to do, and whatever help they need to work from home. So they are taking care as well. And we don't know when we're going to get back to work, but we still, but it's going to take time.
Perfect. Well, I know we still had a few other questions, but I want to make sure we leave some room for everyone to engage inside the Slack community. So first off, thank you so much, Cynthia and Liberty. This has been such a delight. I hope that everyone came with tips and tricks. And the party's not over, but I want to just give you a super thank you for taking the time out during COVID and just sharing your insights.
Yeah, so I actually want to make one closing remark. So actually there are different philosophies in managing teams and managing companies, whatnot. But I personally feel, if the employees are taken care, they will take care of the customers. And if the customers are taken care, obviously you're going to make profits. But I've seen different philosophies. How to take care of the shareholders first, then their customers, and then employees. I don't buy that argument. I personally feel as long as the employees are taken care, they'll take care of the rest. Everything will happen, right? So happy employees will make happy customers make happy shareholders. That's my philosophy. So, and especially this is more prevalent, more important in this time, in these times.
I agree 100%.
As do I. I'll give you a real thumbs up to the virtual one that we're all so used to giving.
Okay, so obviously there you heard Senthil and Mike Liberty. Try and see if that works through onto the Q&A. So we'll move over to the Q&A. We've had a couple of questions come in. We have had a couple for Senthil. Unfortunately, obviously, we can't put those to him right now, but we can follow up with those. One from Marek, though, I can sort of give you a bit of an insight into your question. So the question was, there is still an air of promiscuity with consumers over where they purchase products online. What steps are you taking to engage with consumers and drive loyalty to enable them to have Samsung.com front of mind when considering their next purchase? So actually we work with Samsung on another part of their business called the Experience Store, and you will be seeing sort of some of these pop up. There's a few in London already, but they're sort of going countrywide and beyond, and that's allowing the consumer to come into the store, play with the latest handsets, the latest TVs, all of the Samsung electronics. And actually the purpose of the store is not to buy anything right there or right then. You do have the facility, but actually the whole drive is about engaging the consumer, letting them trial and test the goods. And then the intention is actually really to go away and place the order either over the Moto channel, so through the telephone, or indeed online. In fact, these stores don't really carry stock. It's very much around the experience, and that's, as I say, I think directly to that. Trying to make sure Samsung are front of mind for that. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight. If not, we can follow up with Senthil as well. I have one question that's come in here and was inevitable around PSD2. I shall take this one. So the question is, you project strong growth trends into 2021 and beyond, but you don't mention PSD2 or SCA. So how do you think that guidance will impact e-commerce growth in the future? very relevant, obviously, for the European merchants here. We certainly in the UK have had an extension, a further extension to the enforcement of SCA. So the legislation, well, the legislation is in place, but the enforcement now won't come until September 2021. So we've got some 16, 17 months ahead of that. I don't think it really changes the long game. I think what it allows is for this growth to be unfettered or you know, not complicated by the fact of adding two-factor authentication. I think that really could have been a disaster if we'd seen both this shift of new users online, plus also this introduction of a new control, a new authentication method. As we all know, you know, the SCA rules are going to, in the vast cases, require two steps of authentication, of challenge. I think if you'd combine that level of new users and that level of complexity, then we could have seen a totally different market. I guess my advice to the merchants out there is to still drive forwards with your PSD2 and SCA plans. You know, it's given you a little bit longer window to try and explore those frictionless solutions. Make sure you're whether it's through your fraud solution or your PSP, you know, the challenges you're going to put up are the least disruption to the end consumer. But then in the interim, you know, benefit from this increased traffic and don't be putting up additional barriers in the conversion process. I have one other question here, and I'm going to probably flip this over to Sky if he's there. So Sky, the question is, do you think that the shift to online channels will favour new entrants to the space, or will established vendors find new life in the increased online business?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And obviously we see a pretty healthy mix throughout Signifyd's merchant population. I think the shift probably favors any merchant that's willing to accept that this notion of brick and mortar commerce or physical commerce and then online commerce or e-commerce is somewhat artificial, right? Really the new normal is just that commerce is commerce, and merchants have to address their merchant population in the way that they want to be addressed. I think that the merchants that have addressed that and realized that it's a shift of business from brick and mortar to online are going to be in good shape. I think Central really did sort of address that. Let's call them our more established merchants or traditional merchants that have strong physical presence or are used to dealing with their consumers in one way, shape, or form, probably just continued to do what they were doing previously because it was the way they knew how to interact with those particular merchants. This time has been a good, let's call it, experiment for a lot of established merchants to establish their digital channel and address their customer base in new ways. And I think that once those customers have a taste of that and understand how to interact on those channels, it becomes part of their new normal. Sure, they'll still like to go visit the stores when they have an opportunity to, but they're no longer, say, afraid of or unfamiliar with those online channels, and it becomes a big piece of their business.
Great, thank you, Sky. I have one more here. I'll take this one. So the question's coming: since consumers can't physically visit stores, do you foresee a spike in BOPIS, so buy online, pick up in store? And what does that mean for the ongoing battle against frauds? Okay, so let's break that down a little bit to the BOPIS piece. And there's a bit of a global difference or discrepancy here. I think there's been a lot more stores have fully closed down here in the UK. Certainly when we look at the US, there's been a little bit more, I guess they call it curbside pickup, or stores have functioned as, as delivery points. I think the difference we've seen here, certainly in the UK, and I think across the wider Europe, is we are more akin to using drop boxes. or perhaps it is delivery to the front door. But as I mentioned earlier, with a lot of the sort of grocery pivots, companies who've shifted from serving restaurants to consumers, it's a drop on the doorstep and a quick knock and a walk off. We've used a couple of those services personally here at home, and a lot of the time, by the time I get to the door, the delivery driver is nowhere to be seen. So I think that really poses two challenges when you consider the fraud angle. When you first off look at the delivery box element, you're taking out a fairly substantive piece of data in that decisioning process. You know, there is no fixed address that's tied to that individual, and you certainly probably not going to get this billing address, delivery address attached match. So you've got to start to look at a wider range of data sets, and that's where really you want to be using a machine learning tool that's analyzing a whole bunch of data rather than a more kind of deterministic rules approach. So anyone in that billing address, shipping address requiring a match would rule out any of this Dropbox kind of piece. So it's, again, using your fraud solution to look for more elements of data that mean the dependency on the billing address is reduced massively. When we come to the items that have dropped on the doorstep, I think we are going to see fraudsters exploit that a little bit more. They know that items are going to be dropped and then people are going to walk off. So we will probably see some disingenuous customers start to claim that they never received the items. Now, it may not be the lower value goods around the groceries piece, it might be the higher value of the consumer electronics, etc. But that sort of same behavior is playing out there. If people get a feeling they can get away with it, we know human nature, and so we will probably start to see a claim or an increase in the item not received claims. Again, when you're using a solution that allows you to look at a whole set of data, look at trends and behaviors in regions, areas, down to the individuals, you'll be able to predict who those bad customers are before you actually make the order. Actually, so you'll be cutting it off at source. So yeah, absolutely. You know, it does put pressure on your fraud systems. It puts pressure on your fulfillment when those pieces, those elements of data are removed. But certainly, it's not an unsurmountable problem if you sort of take that network of data approach and remove your reliance on certain individual attributes. Okay, I think that probably is all the questions for now. I will say again, so do feel free to join the e-commerce leaders Slack channel that was in earlier. That will persist across all of our flow events, I do believe, or certainly we will persist after this event. We hope to be back very soon. Who knows, maybe a virtual event, or we might be able to get out and get back to the program of in-person events. But yes, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Obviously our speakers, a bit of a shame, unfortunately, we had to replay that rather than live. But at least, we still were able to get those great insights. So thank you very much. Again, wrapping up, just finally, please do get in contact if you want to deep dive into any of the data or follow up on any of the questions that we saw today.